You are attending the webinar, Developing Vocational Themes, part of Check and Connect Discovery webinar series. My name is Maya Cox, Program Coordinator with the CCLC, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. The purpose of this series is to provide additional information and clarification on the discovery process. Questions about vocational themes will be addressed by the speaker at the end of today's session. However, please feel free to share your questions as they come up using the chat box located in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. I will record them for our speaker. As a reminder, today's webinar centers around developing vocational themes as a part of the discovery process. Questions related to Indiana vocational rehabilitation may be directed toward me. Those questions I am unable to answer will be forwarded to VR. If anyone has any connectivity problems, you may also use the chat box to indicate those. You will also find a pod to the left above the chat box where you can download today's presentation as well as some supporting documents. I'd like to now introduce Patty Cassidy, Senior Consultant with Griffin Hammes & Associates. Patty?
Hi, this is Patty. Thank you so much for the introduction, and let's get started. I'm very excited to be able to talk a bit more about the vocational themes concept today, understanding that we only have about an hour total, so about 45 minutes to clarify some of the concepts, as well as 15 minutes for some questions and answers. I think of all the aspects of the discovery process, the vocational themes generates the most questions and also the most interest. So I will talk a bit today about the concept of the developing of vocational themes and what they mean and how we use them. But please make sure that you download the materials that Maya referenced, the Developing Vocational Themes article. It's called The 3 Vocational Themes, as well as the Vocational Themes Workbook. It has a primary title of Developing Vocational Themes, and we'll reference a little bit of that in today's discussion. Some of you may have already received that document from the initial training that you received in the discovery process, but if not, you will now have a copy of it. So thank you all for being here, and let's get started. I think that what we need to maybe understand, first of all, is where does this vocational themes development fit in the discovery process? The components that I show here on the screen, the overview of discovery, are the components that we at Griffin Hammes teach in our Discovering Personal Genius process. I think for those of you who attended our training, the 2-day training on discovery, we really spent some time going through the process that we use and then tried to match it with the Vocational Rehabilitation Discovery Profile document that Indiana VR uses. So in the concepts of the discovery process, each of the steps that we use, vocational themes is towards the end. It occurs after we spend some time getting to know the individual with the disability that we're representing in employment, in places where they're at their best. That individual is performing tasks, showing us what they know how to do. We spend time in their community. We spend time talking with them in their home. We interview other people who know them well. And then we complete what we call these discovery activities, which we discussed briefly in the training, in terms of getting to know people where they can perform something that they already know how to do, or where they can learn, get a chance to do something similar to what they already know how, so they might learn some new tasks. We've described these in terms of discovery activities, and they can include a variety of things, from participating in doing things in their own home that they already know how to do, being able to go to places in their own community where they spend time. And we can also create opportunities for people in community settings. They can be within community businesses for a short-term job tryout, or just an hour or two of a task, as well as they can be other community settings where people participate in recreational activities, or in church-related activities, wherever an individual might spend some time where they can demonstrate some skills and tasks they already know how to do. At this point in the process, what we are trying to come up with are some broad, maybe what we have called vocational, the preparation or emerging themes, I guess is the best word I'm trying to pull up here. the emerging themes, or maybe they're a common thread that you might see in someone's life. And we're starting to craft some words or language that help us capture not just a person's interests, but multiple facets of what we've learned about them at that point in time. So we're going to today talk about that, what we see highlighted in red, the vocational themes, and we're going to say, how do we develop those words or those phrases that help us capture this information? And then, of course, the discovery process continues with a few more steps. One of those is the completion of informational interviews in businesses and with people who share similar vocational themes to get some knowledge about the opportunities of employment and places where the skills and talents and conditions of employment might be met in different businesses. But it's not employment development yet, but it helps us firm up those vocational themes. Following that the informational interview process, following that, we can really firm up those vocational themes. We then complete the vocational profile or the narrative, and that would be either you're using our document to capture that information, but then transcribe to the vocational rehabilitation discovery profile document that you all have in Indiana that VR is using to capture this information. And then finally, the very last portion will be developing the list of 20 for the job development. And we'll be discussing some of that in a later time. So let's begin with where we fall in this process and think a bit about why we even do this. I think from my experiences in employment development over the past many years that I've been doing this work, and it's been well over 30, what I've learned is that really when we do really good assessments, really good vocational profiling, really good person-centered planning strategies, these kinds of wonderful opportunities to get to know people on a personal basis rather than the old way we used to do things, which was just testing and evaluating and getting to the hardcore result of a job goal. This opportunity for us often left us hanging at the end of that discovery process or that vocational profile process. This work has been developed and matured over many years, but if you'll see some similarities between the work that Michael Callahan has done with Mark Golden Associates and his colleagues, the work that Griffin Hammis does, and many other people who have done similar work around developing strategies that are more beneficial to people with more significant disabilities. And what we learned was that if we spend some time getting to know people well, we do better, we do a much better job at helping people find jobs that fit them better, that they can obtain and sustain over the long haul and help them grow in their careers. But we also know that it works well for everybody. So the exciting part in Indiana is that it's not just a strategy used for people who only have the most significant disabilities, but it's respectful and best practices to use across all the populations of people that we work with. So, of course, why the vocational themes work is that it helps us strategize for a means to go beyond just the typical job openings. And I think that I've had so many experiences working with particularly VR counselors who reflect back that they pay for this wonderful assessment process or this vocational profile, and they get this beautiful image of who is this person. And then the next thing they know, they get the individual has accepted a job working at a fast food restaurant, McDonald's or Walmart or some kind of traditional kind of placement where it was a quick and fast placement. And the idea is that where's the bridge? Where's the opportunity for people to see the work that you've done and to use that work well, to use it in a way that is successful for the job seeker. So I think that for one thing, it really helps the job seeker and that job seeker's team to not just think about what are the job openings in my community, but to think differently about not just what I want to do, but what I can do, where my skills might best be used. Can I go visit employers and learn more about what they have in terms of employment opportunities for me? I think another way that it helps is that vocational themes help us foster creativity. It makes us think differently about our work, and not just in terms of a job goal. It helps us think creatively about our community, and really understanding that our community connections and shared interest is the common means and ways in which most of us get jobs, and that we do not need to rely simply on the want ads or the open businesses or the people who are hiring, but it helps us create an avenue for community connections that help foster better placements and services for people. I think that how I always envisioned this, and I remember the first time I thought of this, is like, oh my gosh, here's the bridge. Here's the road between the good work that we've done in discovery. When I think of all those things about the home visit, the getting to know people, writing a vocational profile document, capturing the narrative of who is this person, and then I would be stumped with, I kind of think I know where I'm going, but I'm not quite sure. And in this slide, what you'll see in the two boxes is the discovery process at the bottom describes the next step of the 3 vocational themes is the development of the list of 20. And on the other side, which is the job development box, that also has the development of the list of 20 for job development. So I think that that's where the bridge happens, is that it really is an overlapping of the two processes, that we begin to see that discovery ends when we can create these vocational themes and begin to think about where businesses are, where people who share similar vocational themes might work in my community. And then that also starts the job development process. So I think of the vocational themes as the bridge. When I first started working in this field, I wanted tools. I wanted tools that would help me gather enough information that I could ultimately put that information in, and my little visual that I always held was kind of put it in the hopper, turn the crank, and it would spit out the ideal job goal. If I only had the right tools, that I could find a tool that will tell me, based on this particular person's interests, skills, capacities, knowledge, needs for support, all of that, I could theoretically come up with an ideal job goal. And I struggled with that. And for some people, it's a much more simple process, but for many of the folks that I've represented, this wasn't such a simple process, and it really became one of not enough information. I could spend time assessing forever because I wasn't using the right tool. So what I'd like to suggest is that this discovery process that we have certainly still can be thought of in terms of the little hopper, and the little visual you have there at the top might be small to see, and I'll bring that up on the screen next. But it is all of the pieces of discovery that go into the development of the vocational profile. It's those activities that we spend time observing and doing with people with disabilities that help us learn about their tasks and their skills and their competencies, and help us understand what interests are and what the evidence of that interest is. What are the conditions of employment that need to be in place, and what are some of the personal attributes? Putting all of that into the hopper, but outcome at the bottom is not a vocational goal or an ideal job, but out from the bottom of that now comes these 3 vocational themes that help us better plan for employment development for this particular job seeker. So let's talk a little bit about that. In your handout that you have on the left-hand side of the screen is this Vocational Themes workbook, and you'll see this particular graphic or flowchart on the cover of that document. And this Vocational Themes workbook, and I'm going to go through some of the concepts that are in this book in the next following slides. I think that what we have is an idea that the Vocational Themes workbook is a tool that can be used by professional staff and or families and job seekers, but it's really not meant to be a document that's put in someone's file or record. It's really meant to be a discussion guide for the team of people that help support the job seeker. It's meant to help you know whether you have done enough of the work that will help you really come up with a good vocational theme. Each of these sections, these 6 arms that you see on this visual, have a page in the Vocational Themes workbook that will allow you to capture that information. And if you don't have those lines filled out, it's kind of a good visual imagery to let you know that you haven't done enough work. So let's go through this a bit and let's see what we can come up with. I'd like to start with the first one which is around the activities. I think that I think if you've heard my session and training, I really dislike this word activity because our field is so fraught with that term in day activity centers or community-based activities, and we use this word a little too often. But it's really about the doing, the discovery part of doing, that the individual job seeker spends time practicing, showing, engaging in things that they know how to do, things that they're interested in doing, things that they can perform with or without support. And it doesn't matter. We're not here to evaluate what somebody does. We're here to do things with somebody and simply to report on what they know how to do. So these activities can really help you confirm what is someone's vocational, what their interests are. When I think about someone who expresses an interest, there's often not any evidence of the interest. It's just an expression. For other people, an interest has lots of activities involved. For example, if someone is interested in crafts or reading, you'll find things in their home that show you that there's evidence of those interests. So we're really looking to confirm and investigate and really come up with some activities and tasks that people can do and that you can do along with, so that you can be observant about what people know how to do. It's not so much about how well they do, it's to know what they do. So many of these can be done around the home and in the community and do not have to be set up as special work sites with businesses. They can be, and that can be very effective. But in many cases, you can start to do activities with people and collect skills where you can observe them and set them up simply along with the job seeker. It's really important that the activity is active. It's not going somewhere and watching and observing. A vocational activity is not doing a job shadow where you simply watch someone. What we're talking about in terms of this is those things where you can take a picture or a video of someone actually performing something. Sometimes if you're going to go to workplaces, we would prefer that they be a paid work experience. If you're going to do something that's unpaid, we typically that is certainly not appropriate to have someone do paid work unless it's just for an hour or two in a situation where they're really not benefiting the employer, but getting an opportunity to sample or try multiple tasks. If you're going to do something that's unpaid, obviously we want to see people in not-for-profit situations. Another component of those arms, yet one of those 6 arms, is tasks. And when we think about an activity is something larger. It's something that is involved with, say, I think the example I often use is preparing a spaghetti dinner. That would be the activity, something larger. And a task are these series of actions that complete a process. So in a task in completing a spaghetti dinner might be cooking the sauce. It could be cooking the spaghetti. It could be setting the table. It could be preparing a salad. There could be multiple tasks. So inside of this task, we want to start looking at what people do and where they might need support. So if someone can complete the task without any help at all, that's fine. If somebody needs help, that's fine too. Just simply support someone in completing the task and then making your observations and what was necessary to be there. But really try to think of ways in which when people do these things, these kinds of tasks, where else might they be utilized? Where else in the community might you go? So that's simply recording the tasks. And it's important to be aware of the difference between an activity, a task, and then a skill. And so the next arm you would see is the skill. And the skill is something that is learned and practiced. It's something that really can help ensure that somebody has competency. And in other words, if somebody is making a spaghetti dinner, for example, and they can slice carrots in 1/4-inch slices for the salad. They can set the timer and cook spaghetti to al dente. They can drain the spaghetti and serve it without it getting sticky. People who can set the table appropriately without prompting. Just those kinds of things that are skill sets. And we want to be very descriptive in this process. Remember that skills can be varied in terms of competency, but it doesn't mean that someone who cannot complete a task independently at the point of your observation doesn't mean that they can't learn to do that later. The idea behind developing a skill set is getting opportunity to practice and to repeat. And with good systematic instruction strategies and in real community places, we often see people can grasp additional skills with related supports. So we really want to learn a little bit about what kind of effective teaching and support strategies might be involved in that skill set. So at the time that you're collecting information about each of these 6 arms, you're also thinking about some of the other information that we'll touch on here in just a second, which is around the support competencies or the needs that people have in order to be successful. So this is an example of skills in terms of restringing a guitar. And as you can see, each of these kinds of steps in the process require an initial set, a different set of skills in terms of removing the old strings. That might be a task in the process, but each one has multiple steps. Removing old strings is loosening each tuner, removing pins, pulling out the strings and discarding them. Another step would be inserting the new strings, setting the pin, threading each new string into the tuning post. So you get the picture that sometimes skills can be as detailed as this, and sometimes skills can be as simple as someone has the skill of pouring water from a pitcher into a glass, or someone has the skill of winding a ball of yarn winding yarn into a ball. So just realize that we're looking for the competencies from all the people that we represent. And I'm sure that many of you work with individuals who have cognitive limitations, as well as people who have more competencies, more complex skills, greater education, greater work experience. So realizing that we have to understand people's skills and competencies through this process. So the other thing that we have, one of the 6 arms, is interest. And often we get stuck on simply interest, that we begin to develop a vocational theme and use the person's simple interests as the theme in the title. And we have to be very cautious about that, because often what we do is we start with interests and we fail to really understand the skills and the tasks. Interests will help us, obviously. They help us gather more avenues to explore someone's skill set. And people who have strong interest and work in an area that they're interested often will learn new tasks better and stay at their jobs longer. So it's very important that interests are considered. And really, when we talk about people who have a strong interest, we often can find people who share those common interests as in part of our job development strategies. Even when we start through the informational interviews, it really helps us guide those conversations. So, it's important to share interests, and that can be a really good motivation strategy, but also as a process of job development and informational interviewing can aid that process. So what we're looking for in terms of interest is the evidence that we might find about that. And sometimes people can have very limited interests. People that we have worked with whose lives are impoverished in social experiences, people who live in situations where they get limited opportunities to leave their home. We really want to spend some time getting to know people, and sometimes we have to introduce people to interests that they may not have otherwise considered. So just being aware that interest is another one. Another arm is the vocational themes arm, is the personal attributes. And this is one of those areas where we have to just, again, be a little cautious. We don't want to have some perfunctory words like we often see in resumes people put together. It works well in a team, works well independently, motivated. I think what we're wanting to see is the things that really are unique to that individual that can be described. I would always want to say if someone is outgoing, I might give a description of always greets people upon anyone new walking into a room. This individual will go forth and introduce themselves to others. or if someone is extremely shy or quiet, this individual might be someone who is reserved and needs to have some time to be introduced to someone or to warm up to a situation. So be concerned about that, the personal attributes, both positive and ones that are of concern, because they are the attributes that will help us connect people to places where the conditions of employment are going to be important. So even though we may have some people whose personal attributes are not always positive, we certainly can reframe them in ways that help us understand and help the team understand what is necessary in terms of those conditions of employment. And then obviously the last piece is about the conditions and the culture, and these are the more considerations of worksite fit. This has to do with hours of work, maybe the supervision required, maybe places that provide support in a more effective and personal way as opposed to working independently. They're really important for us to consider, and we need to make sure that we are observing those things and not just asking the question, but really coming up with a strategy as a team to ensure that we're collecting the appropriate information. So, what are these vocational themes? We have these 6 arms coming into that visual imagery, that graphic of creating a word that helps us. And we use this word divining. And it's really what this word means is to perceive by intuition or insight. Vocational themes are not a prescribed word. It's not a dictionary of titles. It's not a word that can be captured and that we should have a set of, maybe 20 to 30 different words. We encourage all of us to be creative in developing words that capture all 6 of those component pieces. So they're not job descriptions, and they're not job titles, and they're not industries. They're big and broad, and they hold many different kinds of jobs. And even in the smallest of communities, we know that themes can help us look at the potential opportunity for more job-related conversations with people. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Here is an example of a flow chart, and I don't usually fill them out this way. If you have downloaded your Developing Vocational Themes workbook, you'll see that the workbook has each of these 6 arms with a separate page and places for you to write. And we don't want you to only consider maybe the 4 or 5 lines or 6 lines that you're offered. We want you to do as much as you need to collect that information. But for the visual, for today's sake, this is what we'll use this visual imagery. If you think about this woman, Sherry, she has a few interests. She's a woman who likes dogs. She has a dog. She's had many dogs in her life. She loves to do arts and crafts. She spends a lot of time on Facebook and Pinterest and on tweets, and she does all kinds of things in terms of all the social media, and she's very up on that and maintains a lot of contact with friends and others. But she also likes to help other people. So these are some of the things that have been expressed and things that we have learned about her through conversations and by interviewing other people. And we may have seen her do some things in terms of what she does at home, maybe things that she has done for other people, maybe things she does in her own home. So if we go up the next step, which is the tasks performed, and you look above her, above that interest line, you can see that she's done some discovery activities like assisted at the hospital. She went to the guest services desk at the hospital and helped with hospitality, greeting people, doing different activities. She also did another activity where she completed a craft project at Hobby Lobby. She assisted a bookkeeper with year-end budget summaries. And so from those activities, we now move down to the red line, the task performed. Look at some of the things she's learned to do. She was delivering items in a large building. She constructed and painted a birdhouse. She created a balance statement for a bookkeeper. These are some of the activities that she completed. And then over on the right-hand side, if we go under to the skills component, now these are written under the line instead of above the line. The skills were the construction of some small craft items, painting birdhouses. She's got a good eye for color. She was able to manage concerns, giving some good customer service, greeting people at the hospital. She can organize data. She can use Excel, Word, and email. She can balance finances and budgeting. So this is not how we would normally do this. I have these small phrases for the purposes of today's session. We would usually write more narrative. We would have more concrete detail about the skills observed, more concrete detail about the tasks performed. But if you get the gist, what we're doing is we're collecting this kind of information to help come up with a good vocational theme. So some of the conditions are that she needs to have a positive work environment. She wants a 4-hour work shift. She needs to have her place of employment be wheelchair accessible. She wants to work as a member of a team, and she needs some extended breaks. These are some conditions that need to be in place for her. So overall, what we have is an image of a woman who has some ideas about, or we have collected some ideas about work based on her interests, based on things that she's considered. Let's think about that. What are some of the emerging themes that we might see? I'm thinking that, maybe there's something around arts or crafts. I'm trying to capture a word that would allow us to think through maybe not an industry, but maybe something broad. Like, where is it that people who have arts or crafts, or maybe the word creative, where do people who have that as a vocational theme, what kind of businesses, where might they work? That's how I come up with the words that I'm trying to come up with. Is I'm thinking that, this might be a good word, but it might be too broad. I don't know yet. I have to think about that one. And I don't have a team right here with me today, so we would, as a team, need to think a bit more about that. Maybe there should be a work around office support, clerical, organizing. I'm not sure. And I think that this is what the process of developing vocational themes is about, is the crafting, the divining of these themes with other words that really help us. So what other words could we use that might help us? And do we have enough information? I think that from what I have captured so far in that previous document, that we might want to explore a little bit more. Maybe there are other details about this, about Sherry, that would give us a broader sense of skill sets that she may have. I bet that she balances her checkbook. That could be something we could observe. We could see if she has other interest in terms of her community, where maybe she does assist people at her local church, or she might do volunteer work. There might be other things that would help us gain some more knowledge about her. We got to think about how broad can we make this vocational theme so that we can include a variety of different businesses to contact. Sometimes when we think too precisely, like we think of something like finance or bookkeeping, sometimes it will limit us to the only businesses we know that do finance and bookkeeping, as opposed to thinking about all the variety of businesses who need someone who might be able to do that kind of work for them. She also has some excellent skills in the social media aspect of her interest in what she does at home. I might want to look at more of what those things might be. And maybe her work is more related to clerical and media, digital media. So do you see that the crafting that we have comes from the information that we collect? And do we have enough? I would want to go back to my vocational themes workbook and fill in some of these tasks and say, do I have enough information to really cement these particular tasks? Excuse me, these particular themes. For example, I was thinking about two gentlemen that I worked with, John and Mike. And John is a gentleman who really likes cars, and so does Mike. And John is a gentleman who has a lot of car models that he works on. He likes to buy the plastic models and snap them together. He collects auto brochures. As a matter of fact, he's been thrown out of a lot of the auto dealerships in the local town because he goes in and he takes all the brochures off their shelves and takes them home and hoards them all. But he loves cars. He loves to bring out those brochures. He loves to share them with other people, and he talks about cars a lot. Some of the things that we've done with John was helping him to wash a car. He could do it with a lot of support and prompting. He wasn't so happy about it. It was kind of difficult for him to do that. But he did like and did enjoy and did do very well at cleaning the interior of a car, actually the car seats. He can clean with a steam cleaner, and with just minimal prompting, he was able to complete that task. So sometimes what we might come up with is an idea around cars might be his vocational theme. But I think there's a little bit more to the concept. Let me compare him next to Mike. Mike is a man who also has an interest in cars. He owns a car. He drives a car. He can change his own oil. He's changed his own transition fluid. He's done some body work on his car. He was able to go to a salvage yard and locate parts that he needs for a car. He's actually completed some car detailing before. He can repair small engines. He can tune up his lawnmower. So here's two people who both, with the expressed interest of cars, may have different vocational themes for this particular area of interest, because we're not just going to base it on interest, right? So for John, who likes to do car models, and he doesn't have too many skills related to working on cars, his vocational theme could be something as simple as cleaning, or it could be transportation, something broad. I think that John really enjoys being around cars. I think he likes motion, he likes transportation, he likes vehicles. And I don't know what word to capture, but that's the process I go through. He likes to be around car guys. So I don't know what all those facets might be, but I would want to know more about John, learn more about his skills. And this is just one of his vocational themes. And then for Mike, the man who does have some of these more mechanical types of skills, he too could have a vocational theme of transportation, but it also could be something like mechanical. It could be something like machines. It could be something broad enough to make us think about where are businesses who share a similar theme, like Mike or like John, where might they work? And can I have a word or a phrase that would capture those varieties of businesses? So the kind of questions is, what work will allow us to come up with more businesses where the interests, skills, tasks, and conditions of employment are shared by others who also have that theme in their lives? Where do other people with similar interests work? So that process of divining that theme doesn't come in a book. It comes from collaboration with a team. So I can't stress more strongly that the idea behind using a vocational theme and developing a vocational theme does not happen by you, an employment specialist, sitting by yourself. It happens with a job seeker, with family members, with your team members, or with other people who you have invited to be part of that person's employment team, who might not be able to hire the person, but might be able to provide insights to help you come up with some of those unique words or phrases. So this is an example of some other terms and ideas that we've used. A gentleman named Joe, who had a variety of different activities that led us to come up with these kinds of words. One being entertainment. He takes guitar lessons, he's done some repair, he does the sound system at church. It could be healthy lifestyles. He's an avid hiker. He's someone through a group at his church. He's been involved in an exercise club, a diet club. He enjoys outdoors and recreation. And then his faith has also been an extremely important part of his life, and he does a lot of volunteer work, and he attends church and church functions where he participates. So these are some of the words that we've come up with that can help with some of those emerging themes. I hope this is making sense that that there isn't a book of titles. There's no like the dictionary of occupational titles. There is no dictionary of vocational themes, and it's really a crafting of language or words that helps you as the team and as the job developer provide you some direction. So when you think about an entertainment goal, think about where are some businesses in my community where the entertainment is the focus of people who work there. And they could be anywhere from a variety of clubs, music entertainment centers. It could be a bar. It could be a restaurant. It could be a nursing home. There could be all kinds of ways in which the entertainment theme could lead you to your list of 20. So why do we choose 3? And I know that in your the Indiana Vocational VR Discovery Profile document, it allows you to come up with multiples of those. I think that if we have too many, what we end up with is not a very narrow focus on employment that utilizes this particular person's complexity. What we often do when we see we have 4 or 5 themes, we try to combine them, try to come out with more words than just the few that we have, or the multiples that we have. We try to combine them into 3. And if we only have 1, usually that's not enough, because if we have a trouble with them, if we have trouble with finding employment through that only one vocational theme, we have to go back and start over. But we realize that we really need to be as focused as we can to come up with 3 themes, and realize that they are going to be imprecise. And we want them to be as broad as they can be, but it really helps to provide some guidance into that career development. As I was mentioning earlier, we really need to understand that vocational themes should always be done by a team. That one of the major aspects of good discovery is that we don't try to do it alone, and that we spend some of our time building in people and connections in the community to introduce the job seeker to other people who can do them some good, other people who can provide them vocational informational interviews, talking to people who share similar activities, and even to invite people to provide their advice and guidance to the team as a whole. You should never try to jump to the vocational themes, and I think you probably heard us talk, do not jump to the job. We always say that in the middle of discovery, but also don't jump to vocational themes until you really completed that discovery process. Don't assume it's the first thing the person tells you that they really enjoy doing, that's going to be their theme, and tuck that one away in your back pocket saying, I've already got 1, I've only got 2 more to go. Really be careful about that. Be honest to yourself and to your team that you don't want to complete a vocational theme until you really know the person well and you've got a lot of information. But be sure to craft those words that are helpful. We don't want them to reduce the number of businesses that you may have to connect with or the number of people that you may want to call upon, but we want them to broaden the types of businesses that you might be able to go visit, talk to, and start some job development. And we really want you to think about that this is your roadmap as a job developer. It's your work. So we want you to do this not quickly, but with a lot of thoughtful processing. Really think about the words that will help you do a good job in terms of job development. So now we have this vocational themes. We have 3. And we really want in this process to take the list of 20, and what we call that in terms of a list of 20, and I think in the Indiana VR Discovery document, I think it's fewer than that. But we want you to come up with very specific businesses, real businesses in your community, not just daycare center, but the very specific daycare center, preferably with some kind of connection that you've made. You have a warm lead There's a reason why you choose that particular one. And we want to make sure that you steer away from some of those large retail big box stores. Not that they're bad places to go, but if you're in a larger community and you share the similar area with other providers, you're all knocking on the same doors. But also that we don't often get to talk to the people who actually make decisions about hiring in those larger places. So realize that there's a lot of ways to make a living. Don't take the same business and put it in multiple columns. We really, really believe that you can have a lot of fun creating these lists. And again, you don't do it by yourself. You don't sit at a desk and open up your yellow pages or get on the internet and look up places. You really want to spend time building on those personal connections that you have and that your job seeker has that will enable you to come up with a good list of 20. So really what we're doing at this point is we have this discovery staging record, or in terms of the vocational rehabilitation discovery profile, you're pulling all the information together and recording it. You bring your team together and you review this to make sure that you've captured everything well and that this really does describe who is this person. And you're going to start to develop your list of 20. And I think that this is often thought that we have to sit down and do it at once. I think it may take a week, maybe 10 days of consistent working on it, talking to people, bringing resources together, asking for leads, thinking through, maybe going back to some people that you did informational interviews with. You might have some additional leads, but at this point when you complete that list of 20, you will have 60 different places that will help you explore employment opportunities, and they're all based on this job seeker skills and interests and abilities. And it's just an amazing way to see that bridge helping you move into job development. Of course, there's much to this process in terms of using the vocational themes as a means to develop employment, but also to help with the employment development. And then we will be talking somewhat more about that in the next couple of sessions that I'll be doing with this Check and Connect, particularly for rural communities. So I just wanted to point out that the process of these vocational themes is not something that can be readily done in just a 75-minute, or excuse me, a 45-minute session, but I hope I've at least
Patty, thank you very much for your wonderful presentation.
To get you
if you do have questions,
that,
please type them in the chat box located on the bottom left-hand side of your screen, and now I will read them so that they can also be captured in our closed captioning. If you have any
questions, you can certainly bring them up now, or you can call me or email me at the number on your screen. I think we're close to done, and now it's time for some questions.
So I can see that several people are typing, so if you all can just hold tight for a few moments while people can get their thoughts together, hopefully we'll have some great questions. Okay, so Joshua Martin is asking, where do we go to access the recorded session from today? I will enter the URL into the chat box. You also receive reminder emails about these Check and Connect webinars, including today. And in those webinar reminders, you will find a second paragraph that says, have you missed a Check and Connect webinar? You can find the archived webinars here. So I've just provided the link here. You can also go back to your email for the reminder that you received this morning, and you'll also find the URL there. We have another question from Jerry Richardson. It says, and this is for Patty, how do you get businesses on board with taking individuals with disabilities? What's in it for them?
Jerry, I think that's a perfectly well-phrased question. The idea of why businesses should ever want to hire anybody, whether the person has a disability or doesn't have a disability, is certainly around the economics of business. And having a thorough way to approach employers through the what we would call, I guess, the informational interview process as a tool in job development is just as equally important as the tool we use it for in discovery. I think that too often we have spent some time, what one of our colleagues describes as what we call it carpet bombing employers in our community, where we just go out and start spreading our flyers and brochures telling people, if you have any needs, we'll fill your needs. And it really does make a difference in terms of the idea of helping understand what employers' needs are. So really spending time talking to a business and understanding their economic underpinnings about their business is important. They should never hire someone if it doesn't make economic sense. So an economic development approach is better for us than the labor market approach. The labor market approach implies that the job seeker can compete with other people who don't have disabilities, and in some cases that is true, they can, but in many cases they can't. In many cases, individuals with disabilities have less skills, less experience, and do not have the skills that an employer might be looking for to fill an existing position. So using an approach where we spend time with an employer and uncover ways in which an individual can be hired that makes economic sense through either job carving a position where it can release the employer to have other employees to do other tasks that are more economically viable, to bringing resources to the job through resource ownership, to tools and equipment, to a variety of ways in which individuals can benefit the business. But there isn't a magic set of practices or tools. It really comes down to perfecting the art of informational interviewing.
Jerry says that was good. Thank you.
Economic solutions for the employer.
We have time for maybe one more question. Does anyone have any questions?
In a short period of time, but we certainly have a lot of resources and materials through Griffin-Hammis that can talk about the economic development approach. And we'll be touching on some of that in, I think, the March 7th session on rural job development. I hope that answered your question, Jerry.
Lori asks, can you walk us through your team approach?
Well, I'll do my best to describe some techniques that we use. First of all, the very beginning part of the discovery process, we always introduce that to the job seeker, excuse me, to the job seeker and or family members, anybody who is part of that individual's life, to describe the differences between some of the traditional practices they may have experienced in the past, some of the more testing and evaluation, the processes of filling out applications. We're going to tell them we're going to do this differently, and we want to spend time getting to know you over the next couple of weeks to be more effective. And we ask, are there people that you think would be helpful to you that we might meet with? Now, a team, in the ideal world, we would be able to meet on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis, and all sit down and have cookies and sit out in an afternoon and discuss things, but we know that our world doesn't work that way. So I really would think that the process of building a team is something that can be a virtual team, but it's an interconnectivity among people who care about the job seeker. So I always tell people that you can't just do this by yourself. It has to be you, the job seeker, and at least one other person. Typically, it's a family member, but I believe that the job developer, what I would call an employment consultant or employment specialist, role would be to invite other people to participate. And I don't necessarily mean other paid professionals. I mean, if somebody works on cars and likes cars, I might call on my husband's friend Joe who likes cars and say, Joe, do you have any ideas? Could you talk to me about this? Could you talk to Mike about cars, and could you help us think through some places where we might go that he could try some tasks? So I'm thinking about ways of including other people into the lives of folks, and that is what I call a team. Other people have huge teams. You might have seen a story that we've shared in some of our trainings about Stephen's Wood Shop. He's a gentleman, young man in Ohio. He has a team that his parents have developed over years by using a person-centered planning approach. And when he has a meeting,
thank you very much, Patty. I'm hoping that we have time for one more question, if that's okay with you.
Sometimes teams are small, sometimes teams
Johnny
are large.
Asks, typically, how many hours would it take to get through the vocational themes workbook?
Bringing other people in who can help, and bringing in community members who can help. So there's some tools and techniques to doing that, but we absolutely want to make sure that you always have more than just yourself. Sure. Well, I think that a better way to say it is how long does it take to do discovery? Because the Vocational Themes workbook is really just a reflection back on all the steps of discovery. And we tell people that discovery takes between 24 and 60 hours, depending on the job seeker. It could be as few as 10, I guess, for some people who really know themselves well, depending on their needs for this process.
Johnny says thank you.
60
and I just wanted to let everyone know that there was another question asking about the
needs and have very complex
webinar forms and effective documentation that was put on hold earlier in 2015. And they were asking if it was going to be rescheduled, and we do anticipate that it will be rescheduled. We don't have a date yet, but as soon as we do have a date, we will definitely send out a notification. So I don't see any other questions, so I'd like to thank Patty again for sharing your expertise with us today. And we will hopefully see you early next month. Thank you very much.